So maybe just a couple of words on the process of actually making a scientific poster. So the first thing to think about when you're making a scientific poster is that eventually there's going to be a poster session. So eventually you're going to be standing right next to your poster, and you're going to be walking people through the actual work that you've done. The other thing to think about is there might be times when you're actually not by your poster, so ideally the poster should kind of stand on its own merits. The way that I kind of like doing posters is I actually prefer to make it a lot more visual, so I tend to minimize the amount of text and kind of emphasize the number of pictures, because if you're standing by your poster, you can kind of just actually walk through with the person right there and then just use the pictures as to kind of highlight what you're trying to say. If you're just actually walking around through a poster session and you go up to a poster and it's just crammed full with text, it seems a little bit intimidating. You don't really kind of know where to start. You know that you're going to be getting yourself into maybe half an hour of just reading, and you don't know if you want to make that commitment when there's so many other interesting posters. So I would tend to recommend actually minimizing the amount of text and kind of making it visually appealing, and then have things that you can actually just point to as you talk through your poster with someone else. Now, if you're not actually at your poster, it's nice to have enough text to actually kind of explain the gist of what you're presenting, and that way somebody can see if it's interesting to them, they can wait and come back to you when you're actually at your poster. Now, in terms of the actual process of making the poster, generally what really helps is if you have a template to start with. So say, for example, you have a PowerPoint or some kind of a PDF template where you know how big the title is going to be, the different sections of the posters, because there's really a finite amount of real estate on the poster. So you don't really want to start spending half of the poster on the introduction so that you never actually get to the interesting results. And of course, you also have to make room in your poster for acknowledging who actually paid for the work, because a funding agency wants to make sure that their name is actually listed there. And then it's also a thing to point out is that you shouldn't wait to the last minute to actually make your poster, because actually the poster design should really be an iterative type of a process. So as you get better data or you get better images, you can kind of replace what you have. But just as with working on a paper, when you start writing a paper or you start making a poster, it really kind of helps you focus on the whole narrative or the story of the actual work that you've been doing. So you can go see it from all the way from the beginning all the way to the end. So you don't get kind of fixated on a little portion of the story and then forget about other important parts. So it's really kind of an iterative process. Focus on the visuals, minimize all of the tedious text, and you'll be successful in your poster making. So what are the guidelines for actually coming up with a poster? So how do you actually decide how it should look? So these types of guidelines or rules are probably going to depend on which particular institution you're working on. If you're presenting this at more of an industry conference versus an academic conference, and a lot of it will also just depend on the personal preferences of your supervisor. But generally, the guidelines should be make the story very clear and coherent and kind of a standalone type of a piece. You want it to be interesting and especially visually appealing. And I would probably suggest that you probably don't want to focus in on any little nitpicky little details, because it's very easy to talk through somebody that's actually interested in those, but if they take up real estate on your poster, maybe that's not the best use of your space.